Hello, welcome. This is Let's Talk About Myths, baby, and I am that host of yours, Liv, here with another reading from Ovid's Metamorphoses, because, it's Ovid. It's great. As always with these types of episodes, this is just a straight reading of an old public domain translation of Ovid. If you're looking to read some of this work yourself, I would highly recommend the new translation by Stephanie McCarter. It's really readable and beautiful and tries to consciously address a lot of the more problematic aspects that have existed in earlier translations, particularly those translations done by old white men, like this one. But hey, this is the one that we have to read, so we enjoy it for what it is. Last time, we had both the incredibly fun and interesting story of Arachne and Minerva, Athena, and also the most horrifying story of all Greek myth, that of Procne and Philomela. Honestly, that one was fucking tough to read. I won't lie. I think you could hear it in my tone, but yeah, it's just awful. Thankfully, Ovid is still good. Also, a reminder that if you are confused by the Latin/Roman names for the gods, there's a link in the episode description that will tell you some of the more common ones so you know their Greek names. But Procne and Philomela aside, fortunately this week, this next book starts off with a bang, because we are getting right into none other than Jason and Medea. What a time. This is Ovid's Metamorphoses, Book 7, translated by Brooks Moore. Over the storm-tossed waves, the Argonauts had sailed in Argo, their long ship, to where King Phineus, needy in his old age, reigned, deprived of sight and feeble. When the sons of Boreas had landed on the shore and seen the Harpies snatching from the king his nourishment, befouling it with beaks obscene, they drove those human vultures thence. And having suffered hardships and great toils, after the day they rescued the sad king from the vile Harpies, those twin valiant youths, Zetes and Calais, came with their chief, the mighty Jason, where the Phasis flows. From the green margin of that river, all the crew of Argonauts, by Jason led, went to the king Aeetes, and required the golden fleece that he received from Phrixus. When they had bargained with him full of wiles, he offered to restore the golden fleece only to those who might to him return, victorious from hard labors of great risk. Medea, the king's daughter near his throne, saw Jason, leader of the Argonauts, as he was pressing to secure a prize, and loved at sight with a consuming flame. Although she struggled to suppress her love, unable to restrain herself, she said, "In vain I've striven to subdue my heart. Some god it must be, which I cannot tell, is working to destroy my hapless life, or else it is the burning flame of love that in me rages. If it is not love, why do the mandates of my father seem too harsh? They surely are too harsh. Why do I fear that he may perish, whom I have seen only once? What is the secret cause that I am agitated by such fears? It is no other than the god of love. Thrust from your virgin breast such burning flames and overcome their hot unhappiness. If I could do so, I should be myself. But some deluding power is holding me helpless against my will. Desire persuades me one way, but my reason still persuades me another way. I see a better course and I approve, but follow its defeat. O royal maiden, why are you consumed with love for this strange man, and why are you so willing to be carried by the nuptial ties so far from your own country, where, indeed, are many brave men worthy of your love? Whether for life or death his numbered hours are in the mercy of the living gods, and that he may not suffer risk of death too well foreseen, now let my prayers prevail, righteously uttered of a generous heart without the stress of love. What wicked thing has Jason done? His handsome person, youth, and noble ways would move a heart of stone. Have I a heart of flint, or was I born a tigress to deny him timely aid? Unless I interpose, he will be slain by the hot breath of brazen-footed bulls, or will be slaughtered by the warriors sprung miraculous from earth, or will be given to satisfy the ravenous appetite of a huge dragon. Let my gloating eyes be satiate with his dying agonies. Let me incite the fury of these bulls, stir to their bloodlust mad-born sons of earth, rouse up to the never-sleeping dragon's rage. Avert it, gods. But why should I cry out upon the gods to save him from such wrong, when, by my actions and my power, myself may shield him from all evils? Such a course would wreck the kingdom of my father, and by me the wily stranger would escape from him, and spreading to the wind his ready sails, he would forget and leave me to my fate. Oh, if he should forget my sacrifice, and so prefer those who neglected him, let him then perish in his treachery. But these are idle thoughts. His countenance reveals innate nobility and grace that should dispel all fear of treachery and guarantee his ever-faithful heart. The gods will witness our united souls, and he shall pledge his faith. Secure of it, my fear will be removed. Be ready, then, and make a virtue of necessity. Your Jason owes himself to you, and he must join you in true wedlock. Then you shall be celebrated through the land of Greece by throngs of women for the man you saved. Shall I then sail away and so forsake my sister, brother, father, gods, and land that gave me birth? My father is indeed a stern man, and my native land is all too barbarous. My brother is a child, my sister's goodwill is good help for me, and heaven's supreme God is within my breast. I shall not so be leaving valued hopes, but will be going surely to great things. And I should gain applause from all the world as having saved the threatened Argonauts, most noble of the Greeks, and in their land, which certainly is better than my own, become the bride of Jason, for whose love I should not hesitate to give the world, and whose love the living gods rejoice so greatly. For his sake they would bestow their favors on my head and make the stars my habitation. Should I hesitate because the wreck-strewn mountains bar the way and clash together in the Euxine waves, or fear Charybdis, fatal to large ships, that sucks the deep sea in its whirling gulf and spouts far upward with alternate force? Or Scylla, circled with infuriate hounds howling in rage from deep Sicilian waves? Safe in the shielding arms of him I love, on Jason's bosom leaning, I shall be borne safely over wide and hostile seas, and in his dear embrace forget my fears. Or if for anything I suffer dread, it will be only for the one I love. Alas! Medea, this vain argument has only furnished plausible excuse for criminal desires, and desecrates the marriage rite. It is a wicked thing to think upon. Before it is too late to forget your passion and deny this guilt. And after she had said these words, her eyes were opened to the prize of modesty, chaste virtue, and a pure affection, and Cupid, vanquished, turned away and fled. Then, to an ancient altar of the goddess named Hecate, Perseus' daughter took her way in the deep shadows of a forest. She was strong on purpose now, and all the flames of vanquished passion had died down. But when she saw the son of Aeson, dying flames leapt up again. Her cheeks grew red, then all her face went pale again as a small spark, when hid beneath the ashes, if fed by a breath of wind, grows and regains its strength as it is fanned to life, so now her love that had been smoldering, and which she would have thought was almost dead when she had seen again his manly youth, blazed up once more. For on that day his graceful person seemed as glorious as a god, and as she gazed and fixed her eyes upon his countenance, her frenzy so prevailed, she was convinced that he was not a mortal, and her eyes were fascinated, and she could not turn away from him. But when he spoke to her and promised marriage, grasping her right hand, she answered, as her eyes suffused with tears, I see what I will do, and ignorance of truth will not be my undoing now, but love itself. By my assistance you shall be preserved, but when preserved, fulfill your promise. He swore that she could trust him. Then by the goddess of triple form Diana, Trivia or Luna called, and by her sacred groves and fanes he vowed, and by the hallowed sun that sees all things, and by his own adventures and his life, on these the youthful Jason took his oath. With this she was assured, and quickly gave to him the magic herbs. He learnt their use, and full of joy withdrew into his house. Now when the dawn had dimmed the glittering stars, the people hastened to the sacred field of Mars, and on the hills expectant stood. Arrayed in purple and in majesty distinguished by his ivory scepter, sat the king, surrounded by a multitude. Below them on the visioned field of Mars, huge brazen-footed bulls were breathing forth from adamantine nostrils living flames, blasting the verdant herbage in their path. As forges glow with hot flames resound, or as much quicklime burnt in earthen kilns crackles and hisses as if mad with rage, sprinkled with water, liberating heat, so their hot throats and triple-heated sides resounding told of pent-up fires within. The son of Aeson went to meet them. As he came to meet them, the fierce animals turned on him, faces terrible and sharp horns tipped with iron, and they pawed the dusty earth with cloven feet, and filled the space with fiery bellowings. The minions were stark with fear. He went up to the bulls, not feeling their hot breath at all, so great the power of his charmed drugs. And while he was stroking their down-hanging dewlaps with a fearless hand, he placed the yoke down on their necks and made them draw the heavy plow, and cut through the fields that never felt the steel before. The Colchians were amazed and silent, but the loud shouting of the Minians increased their hero's courage. Taking then the serpent's teeth out of a brazen helmet, he sowed them, broadcast in the new plowed field. The moist earth softened these seeds that were steeped in virulent poison, and the teeth swelled up and took new forms. And just as in its mother an infant gradually assumes the form of man, and is perfected through all parts within, and does not come forth to the light till fully formed, so when the forms of men had been completed in the womb of earth, made pregnant, they rose up from it. And what is yet more wonderful, each one clashed weapons that had been brought forth with him. When his companions saw the warriors turn as if with one accord to hurl their spears sharp-pointed at the head of Jason, fear unnerved the boldest and their courage failed. So too the maid whose sorcery had saved him from much danger, when she saw the youth encompassed by those raging enemies, and he alone against so many, struck with sudden panic, she turned ashen white. Her bloodless cheeks were blanched, and chilled with fear, she wilted to the ground. And lest the herbs so lately given him might fail his need, she added incantations and invoked mysterious arts. While she protected him, he seized upon a heavy stone and hurled it into the midst of his new enemies. Distracted by this cast and murderous, they turned from him, and clashing their new arms, those earth-born brothers fought among themselves till all were slaughtered in blood-thirsty strife. Gladly the Greeks acclaimed him conqueror, and pressed around him for the first embrace. Then, too, Medea, barbarous Colchian maid, although her modesty restrained her heart, eagerly longed to fold him in her arms, but careful of her good name, held aloof, rejoicing in deep, silent love, and she acknowledged to the gods her mighty gift of incantations. But the dragon, still alert, magnificent and terrible, with gorgeous crest and triple tongue and fangs barbed as a javelin, guards the golden fleece. And Jason can obtain that quest only if slumber may seal up the monster's eyes. Jason, successful, sprinkled on his crest Lethean juices of a magic herb, and then recited thrice the words which bring deep slumber, potent words which would becalm the storm-tossed ocean, and would stop the flow of the most rapid rivers of our earth, and slowly slumber sealed the dragon's eyes. While that great monster slept, the hero took the golden fleece, and proudly sailed away, bearing his treasure and the willing maid, whose aid had saved him, to his native port, Iolcus, victorious with the Argonauts. Now when the valiant Argonauts returned to Thessaly, their happy relatives, fathers and mothers, praised the living gods, and with their hallowed gifts enhanced the flames with precious incense, and they offered Jove a sacred bullock, rich with gilded horns. But Jason's father Aeson came not down rejoicing to behold his son, for now worn out with many years he waited death. And Jason, to Medea grieving, said, "Dearest, to whom my life and love are due, although your kindness has been great to me, and you have granted more than I should ask, yet one more thing I beg of you. If your enchantments can accomplish my desire, take from my life some years, that I should live, and add them to my father's ending days." And as he spoke, he could not check the tears. Medea, moved by his affection, thought how much less she had grieved for her loved sire. And she replied, "A wicked thing you ask. Can I be capable of using you in such a manner as to take your life and give it to another? Ask not me a thing so dreadful. May the gods forbid. I will endeavor to perform for you a task much greater. By the powers of night I will most certainly return to him the lost years of your father, but must not deprive you of your own. Oh, grant the power, great goddesses of the triple form, that I may not fail to accomplish this great deed." 3 nights were wanting for the moon to join her circling horns and form a perfect orb. When these were past, the rounded light shone full and bright upon the earth. Through the still night alone, Medea stole forth from the house with feet bare and in flowing garment clothed, her long hair unadorned and not confined. Deep slumber had relaxed the world and all that's living, animals and birds and men, and even the hedges and the breathing leaves are still, and motionless the laden air. Only the stars are twinkling, and to them she looks and beckons with imploring hands. Now thrice around she paces, and 3 times besprinkles her long hair with water dipped from crystal streams, which having done, she kneels a moment on the cold bare ground, and screaming 3 times calls upon the night. O faithful night, regard my mysteries. O golden lighted stars, O softly moving moon, genial, your fire succeeds the heated day. O Hecate, grave, 3-faced queen of these charms of enchanters and enchanters' arts. O fruitful earth, giver of potent herbs, O gentle breezes and destructive winds, you mountains, rivers, lakes, and sacred groves, and every dreaded god of silent night, attend upon me. When my power commands, the rivers turn from their accustomed ways and roll far backward to their secret springs. I speak, and the wild troubled sea is calm, and I command the waters to arise. The clouds I scatter, and I bring the clouds. I smooth the wind and ruffle up their rage. I weave my spells and recite my charms. I pluck the fangs of serpents, and I move the living rocks and twist the rooted oaks. I blast the forests. Mountains at my word tremble and quake, and from her granite tombs the liberated ghosts arise as earth astonished groans. From your appointed ways, O wonder-working moon, I draw you down against the magic-making sound of gongs and brazen vessels of Temessa's ore. I cast my spells and veil the jeweled rays of Phoebus' wane and quench Aurora's fires, At my command you tamed the flaming bulls which long disdained to bend beneath the yoke until they pressed their necks against the plow. And subject to my will you raised up war till the strong company of dragon birth were slaughtered as they fought amongst themselves. And last you lulled asleep the warden's eyes, guards of the golden fleece. Till then awake and sleeping never, so, deceiving him, you sent the treasure to the Grecian cities. Witness my need of supernatured herbs, elixirs potent to renew the years of age, giving the bloom of youth. You shall not fail to grant me this, for not in vain the stars are flashing confirmation, not in vain the flying dragons, harnessed by their necks, from skies descending bring my chariot down. A chariot sent from heaven came to her, and soon as she had stroked the dragons' necks, and shaken in her hands the guiding reins, as soon as she had mounted, she was borne quickly above through unresisting air. And sailing over Thessaly, she saw the vale of Tempe, where the level soil is widely covered with a crumbling chalk. She turned her dragons towards new regions there, and she observed the herbs by Ossa born, the weeds on lofty Pelion, Othrys, Pindus, and vast Olympus, and from here she plucked the needed roots, or there the blossoms clipped all with the moon-curved sickle made of brass. Many the wild weeds of Apidanus, as well as blue amphrsis, banks she chose, and naught escaped Enipius from her search, Penean stretches and Sperchelean banks, and she yielded what she chose. And Bebe's shore, where sway the rushes, she plucked up grass, a secret grass, from fair Euboean fields, life-giving virtues and their waving blades, as yet unknown for transformation wrought on Glaucus. All those fields she visited with ceaseless diligence in quest of charms. 9 days and 9 nights sought strong herbs, and the swift dragons with their active wings failed not to guide the chariot where she willed, until they reached her home. The dragons then had not been ever touched by anything except the odor of surrounding herbs, and yet they sloughed their skins the growth of years. She would not cross the threshold of her home, nor pass its gates, but standing in the field, alone beneath the canopy of heaven, she shunned all contact with her husband, while she built up from the ever-living turf 2 altars, one of which upon the right of Hecate was given, but the other upon the left was sacred then to you, O Hebe, goddess of eternal youth. Festooning woodland boughs and sweet vervain adorned these altars, near by which she dug as many trenches. Then, when all was done, she slaughtered a black ram, and sprinkled with blood the thirsty trenches, after which she poured from rich Carcesian goblets generous wine and warm milk, grateful to propitious gods. The deities of earth on whom she called, entreating, as she did so, Pluto, lord of ghastly shades, and ravished Proserpine, that they should not, in undue haste, deprive her patient's aged limbs of life. When certain she compelled the gods' regard, assured her incantations and long prayers were both approved and heard, she bade her people bring out the body of her father-in-law, old Aeson's worn-out body, and when she had buried him in a deep slumber by her spells, as if he were a dead man, she then stretched him out upon a bed of herbs. She ordered Jason and his servants thence, and warned them not to spy upon her rites with eyes profane. As soon as they retired, Medea, with dishevelled hair and wild abandon, as a bacchanalian, paced times 3 around the blazing altars, while she dipped her torches, splintered at the top, into the trenches, dark with blood, and lit the dipped ends in the sacred altar flames. Times 3 she purified the ancient man with flames, and thrice with water, and 3 times with sulphur, as the boiling mixture seethed and bubbled in the brazen cauldron near. And into this acerbic juices, roots and flowers and seeds from veils Haemonian, and mixed elixirs into which she cast stones of strange virtue from the Orient, and sifted sands of ebbing ocean's tide, white hoarfrost gathered when the moon was full, the nauseating flesh and luckless wings of the uncanny screech owl, and the entrails from a mysterious animal that changed from wolf to man, from man to wolf again. The scaly sloughing of a water snake, the medic liver of a long-lived stag, and the hard beak and head of an old crow, which was alive 9 centuries before. These and 1,000 nameless things the foreign sorceress prepared and mixed and blended all together with a branch of peaceful olive, old and dry with years. And while she stirred the withered olive branch in the hot mixture, it began to change from brown to green, and presently put forth new leaves, and soon was heavy with the wealth of luscious olives. As the ever-rising fire threw bubbling forth beyond the cauldron's rim, the ground was covered with fresh verdure, flowers, and all luxuriant grasses and green plants. Medea, when she saw this wonder, took her unsheathed knife and cut the old man's throat. Then, letting all his old blood out of him, she filled his ancient veins with the rich elixir. As he received it through his lips or wound, his beard and hair, no longer white with age, turned quickly to their natural vigor, dark, and no longer lean and sallow, for his new blood coursed in his well-filled veins. Astonished, when released from his deep sleep and strong in youth, his memory assured him such he was years 4 times 10 before that day. Bacchus, from his celestial vantage, saw this marvel, and convinced his nurses might then all regain their former vigor. He pled with Medea to restore their youth. The Colchian woman granted his request. But so her malice might be satisfied, Medea feigned she had a quarrel with her husband, and for safety she had fled to Peleus. There, since the king himself was heavy with old age, his daughters gave her generous reception, and these girls the shrewd Medea in a short time won by her false show of friendliness. And while among the most remarkable of her achievements she was telling how she had rejuvenated Aeson, and she dwelt particularly on that strange event, these daughters were induced to hope that by some skill like this their father might regain his lost youth also. And they begged of her this boon, persuading her to name the price, no matter if it was large. She did not reply at once, and seemed to hesitate, and so she held their fond minds in a deep suspense by her feigned meditation. When she had at length declared she would restore his youth, she said to them, "That you may have strong confidence in this my promised boon, the oldest leader of your flock of sheep shall be changed into a lamb again by my prized drugs." Straightway a woolly ram, worn out with the length of untold years, was brought. His great horns curved around his hollow temples. After she had cut his scrawny throat with her sharp knife, Thessalian, barely staining it with his thin blood, Medea plunged his carcass in a bronze-made kettle, throwing in it at the same time juices of great potency. These made his body shrink and burnt away his 2 horns, and with horns his years. And now thin bleating was heard from within the pot, and even while they wondered at the sound, a lamb jumped out and, frisking, ran away to find some udder with its needed milk. Amazed, the daughters looked on, and, now that these promises had been performed, they urged more eagerly their first request. 3 times Phoebus unyoked his steeds after their plunge in Ebro's stream, and on the 4th night stars shone brilliant in the dark foil of the sky, and then the treacherous daughter of Aeetes set some clear water over a hot fire, and put in herbs of no potency, And now a death-like sleep held the king down, his body all relaxed, and with the king his guards, a sleep which incantations with the potency of magic words had given. The sad king's daughters, as they had been bid, were in his room, and with Medea stood around his bed. "Why do you hesitate?" Medea said. "You laggards, come and draw your swords. Let out his old blood, that I may refill his empty veins again with young blood. In your hands your father's life and youth are resting. You, his daughters, must have love for him, and if the hopes you have are not all vain, come, do your duty by your father, drive out old age at the point of your good weapons, and let out his blood unfeebled. Cure him with the stroke of iron." Spurred on by these words, as each one of them was filial, she became the leader in the most unfilial act, and that she might not be most wicked, did the wicked deed. Not one could bear to see her own blows, so they turned their eyes away, and every face averted so, they blindly struck him with their cruel hands. The old man, streaming with his blood, still raised himself on elbow, and half mangled, tried to get up from his bed, with all those swords around him. He stretched out his pale arms, and he cried, "What will you do, my daughters? What has armed you to the death of your loved father?" Their wronged courage left them, and their hands fell. When he would have said still more, Medea cut his throat and plunged his mangled body into boiling water. Only because her winged dragons sailed swiftly with her up to the lofty sky escaped Medea punishment for this unheard-of crime. Her chariot sailed above embowered Pelion, long the lofty home of Chiron, over Othrys and the vale made famous where Carambis met his fate. Carambis, by the aid of nymphs, from there was wafted through the air on wings, when earth was covered by the overwhelming sea, and so escaped Deucalion's flood uncrowned. She passed by Patani upon the left, with its huge serpent image of a hard stone, and also past the grove called Ida's, where the stolen bull was changed by Bacchus's powers into a hunted stag. In that same vale Paris lies buried in the sand, and over fields where Mira warning harked, Medea flew over the city of Eurypylus upon the Isle of Cos, whose women wore the horns of cattle when from there had gone the herd of Hercules, and over Rhodes beloved of Phoebus, where Telchinian tribes dwelt, whose bad eyes corrupting power shot forth. Jove, utterly despising, thrust them deep beneath his brother's waves, over the walls of old Carthia, where Alcidamas had seen with wonder a tame dove arise from his own daughter's body. And she saw the lakes of Hyre in Tumesia's vale, by swans frequented, there to satisfy his love for sickness. Phyleus gave 2 living vultures shell for him, subdued a lion, and delivered it to him, and mastered a great bull at his command. But when the wearied Phyleus refused to render to his friend the valued bull, indignant, the youth said, "You shall regret your hasty words," which having said he leaped from a high precipice as if to death, but gliding through the air on snow-white wings, was changed into a swan. Dissolved in tears, his mother, Hyre, knew not what he was saved, and weeping, formed the lake that bears her name. And over Pleuron, where on trembling wings escaped the mother comb from her sons, Medea flew, and over the fair isle Calaria, sacred to Latona, she beheld the conscious fields whose lawful king, together with his queen, were changed into birds. Upon her right Kylene could be seen. There Menaphon, degraded as a beast, outraged his mother. In the distance she beheld Cephissus, who lamented long his hapless grandson, by Apollo changed into a bloated sea-calf. And she saw the house where King Eumelus mourned the death of his aspiring son. Borne on the wings of her enchanted dragons, she arrived at Corinth, whose inhabitants, 'tis said, from many mushrooms, watered by the rain spring into being. There she spent some years, but after the new wife had been burnt by the Colchian witchcraft and 2 seas had seen the king's crown palace all aflame, then savagely she drew her sword and bathed it in the blood of her own infant sons, by which atrocious act she was revenged. And she, a wife and mother, fled the sword of her own husband, Jason. On the wings of her enchanted Titan dragons born, she made escape, securely nor delayed, until she entered the defended walls of great Minerva's city, at the hour when aged Periphas, transformed by Jove, together with his queen on eagle wings, flew over its encircling walls, with whom the guilty Halcyone, skimming seas, safely escaped upon her balanced wings. And after these events, Medea went to Aegeus, king of Athens, where she found protection from her enemies for all this evil done. With added wickedness, Aegeus, after that, united him to her in marriage. All unknown to him came Theseus to his kingly court. Before the time his valor had established peace on all the isthmus, raved by dual seas, Medea, seeking his destruction, brewed the juice of aconite, infesting shores of Scythia, where, 'tis fabled, the plant grew on soil infected by Cerberian teeth. There is a gloomy entrance to a cave that follows a declivitous descent. There Hercules, with chains of adamant, dragged him from the dreary edge of Tartarus, that monster watchdog, Cerberus, which, vain opposing, turned his eyes aslant from light, from dazzling day. Delirious, enraged, that monster shook the air with triple howls, and, frothing, sprinkled as it raved the fields, once green, with spewing of white poison foam. And this, converted into plants, sucked up a deadly venom with the nourishment of former soils, from which productive grew upon the rock, thus formed the noxious plant, by rustics from that cause named aconite. Medea worked on Aegeus to present his own son, Theseus, with a deadly cup of aconite, prevailing by her art so that he deemed his son an enemy. Theseus unwittingly received the cup, but just before he touched it to his lips, his father recognized the sword he wore, for graven on its ivory hilt was wrought a known device, the token of his race. Astonished, Aegeus struck the poison cup from his devoted son's confiding lips. Medea suddenly escaped from death, in a dark whirlwind her witch singing raised. Recoiling from such utter wickedness, rejoicing that his son escaped from death, the grateful father kindled altar fires and gave rich treasure to the living gods. He slaughtered scores of oxen decked with flowers and gilded horns. The sun has never shone upon a day more famous in that land, for all the elders and the common folk united in festivities, with wine inspiring wit and song. "O you," they sang, "immortal Theseus, victory was yours. Did you not slaughter the huge bull of Crete? Yes, you did slay the boar of Crommyon, where now the peasant unmolested plows. And Periphetes, wielder of the club, was worsted when he struggled with your strength. And fierce Procrustes, matched with you beside the rapid river, met his death. And even Cercyon in Eleusis lost his wicked life, inferior to your might. And Sinis, a monstrosity of strength, who bent the trunks of trees and used his might against the world for everything that's wrong. For evil he would force down the earth, pine tops to shoot men's bodies through the air. Even the road to Megara is safe. For you did hurl the robber Sciron sheer over the cliff, both land and sea denied, his bones a resting place, as tossed about they changed into the cliffs that bear his name. How can we tell the number of your deeds, deeds glorious that now exceed your years? For you, brave hero, we give public thanks and prayers. To you we drain our cups of wine. And all the palace rings with happy songs and with the grateful prayers of all the people, and sorrow in that city is not known. But pleasure always is alloyed with grief, and sorrow mingles in the joyous hour. While the king Aegeus and his son rejoiced, Minos prepared for war. He was invincible in men and ships, and stronger in his rage to wreak due vengeance on the king who slew his son Androgeus. But first he sought some friends to aid his warfare, and he scoured the sea with a swift fleet, which was his strength. Anaphe and Istipalaia both agreed to join his cause, the first one moved by promises, the second by his threats. Level Myconus and the chalky fields of Cymolus agreed to aid, and Syros, covered with wild thyme, level Seriphos, Paros of marble cliffs, and that place which Arne, the impious Sifnian, had betrayed, who, having got the gold which in her greed she had demanded, was changed to a bird, which ever since that day imagines gold its chief delight, a Blackfoot black-winged daw. But Olearis, Didymai, Antenos, Gyaros, Andros, and Peparethos, rich in its glossy olives, gave no aid to the strong Cretan fleet. Sailing from them, Minos went to Oenopia, known realm of the Aeacidae. Men of old time had called the place Oenopia, but Aeacus styled it Aegina from his mother's name. At his approach an eager rabble rushed, resolved to see and know so great a man. Telamon met him, and his brother younger than Telamon, and Phocus, who was third in age. Even Aeacus appeared, slow with the weight of years, and asked him what could be a reason for his coming there. The ruler of 100 cities sighed, and as he beheld the sons of Aeacus, for they reminded him of his lost son, and heavy with his sorrow he replied, I come imploring you to take up arms and aid me in the war against my foes, for I must give that comfort to the shade of my misfortuned son, whose blood they shed. But Aeacus replied to Minos, Nay, it is a vain request you make, for we are bound in strict alliance to the land and people of Cecropia. Full of rage because he was denied, the king of Crete, Minos, as he departed from their shores, replied, Let such a treaty be your bane. And he departed with his crafty threat, believing it expedient not to waste his power in wars until the proper time. Before the ships of Crete had disappeared, before the mist and blue of waves concealed their fading outlines from the anxious throng which gathered on Oenopian shores, a ship of Athens covered with wide sails appeared, and anchored safely by their friendly shore, and presently the mighty Cephalus, well known through all that nation for his deeds, addressed them as he landed, and declared the goodwill of his people. Him the sons of Aeacus remembered well, although they had not seen him for some untold years. They led him to their father's welcome home, and with him also his 2 comrades went, Clytus and Butes. Center of all eyes, the hero still retained his charm. The customary greetings were exchanged, the graceful hero, bearing in his hands a branch of olive from his native soil, delivered the Athenian message, which requested aid, and offered for their thought the treaty and the ancestral league between their nations. And he added, Minos sought not only conquest of the Athenian state, but sovereignty of all the states of Greece. And when this eloquence had shown his cause, with left hand on his gleaming scepter's hilt, King Aeacus exclaimed, Ask not our aid, but take it, Athens, and count boldly yours of all the force this island holds, and all things which the state of my affairs supplies. My strength for this war is not light, and I have many soldiers for myself and for my enemy. Thanks to the gods, the times are happy, giving no excuse for my refusal. May it prove so, Cephalus replied, and may your city multiply in men. Just now, as I was landing, I rejoiced to meet youths, fair and matched in age, and yet I miss among them many whom I saw before when I last visited your city. Aeacus then groaned, and with sad voice replied, With weeping we began, but better fortune followed. Would that I could tell the last of it, and not the first. Giving my heart command that simple words and briefly spoken may not long detain. Those happy youths who waited at your need, who smiled upon you and for whom you ask, because their absence grieves your noble mind, they've perished, and their bleaching bones or scattered ashes only may remain, sad remnants, impotent of vanished power, so recently my hope and my resource. Because this island bears a rival's shame, a deadly pestilence was visited on my confiding people, through the rage of jealous Juno, flaming for revenge. This great calamity at first appeared a natural disease, but soon its power baffled our utmost efforts. Medicines availing not, a reign of terror swept from shore to shore, and fearful havoc raged. Thick darkness, gathered from descending skies, enveloped our devoted land with heat and languid sickness. For the space of full 4 moons, 4 times the moon increased her size. Hot south winds blew with pestilential breath upon us. At the same time the diseased infection reached our needed springs and pools. Thousands of serpents crawled over our disease. At first was limited to death of dogs and birds and cattle, or among wild beasts, The luckless plowman marvels when he sees his strong bulls fall while at their task and sink down into the furrow. Woolly flocks bleat feebly while their wool falls off without a cause, and while their bodies pine away. The prized horse of high courage and of great renown when on the racecourse has now lost victorious spirit, and forgetting his remembered glory groans in his shut stall, doomed for inglorious death. The boar forgets to rage, the stag to trust his speed, and even the famished bear to fight the stronger herd. Death seizes on the vitals of all life, and in the woods and in the fields and roads the loathsome bodies of the dead corrupt the heavy hanging air. Even the dogs, the vultures, and the wolves refuse to touch the putrid flesh. There in the sultry sun, rotting upon the earth, emitting steams and exhalations with a baneful sweep, increasing the dead contagion's wide extent. So spreading with renewed destruction gained from its own poison, the fierce pestilence appeared to leap from molding carcasses of all the brute creation, till it struck the wretched tillers of the soil, and then extended its dominion over all this mighty city. Always it began as if the patient's bowels were scorched with flames. Red blotches on the body next appeared, and sharp pains in the lungs prevented breath. The swollen tongue would presently loll out, rough and discolored from the gaping mouth, wide gasping to inhale the noxious air, and show red, throbbing veins. The softest bed and richest covering gave to none relief, but rather the disease would bear himself to cool his burning flesh upon the ground, only to heat the earth, and no relief returned. And no physician could be found, for those who ministered among the sick were first to suffer from the dread disease. The cruel malady broke out upon the very ones who offered remedies. The hallowed art of medicine became a deadly snare to those who knew it best. The only safety was in flight, and those who were the nearest to the stricken ones, and who most faithfully observed their wants, were always first to suffer as their wards. And many, certain of approaching death, indulged their wicked passions, recklessly abandoned and without the sense of shame, promiscuously huddled by the wells and rivers and cool fountains, but their thirst no water could assuage, and death alone was able to extinguish their desire. Too weak to rise, they die in water they pollute, while others drink its death. A madness seizing on them made their beds become most irksome to their tortured nerves. Demented, they could not endure the pain, and leaped insanely forth, or if too weak, the wretches rolled their bodies on the ground, insistent to escape from hated homes, imagined sources of calamity. For, since the cause was hidden and unknown, the horrible locality was blamed. Suspicion seizes on each frail presence as proof of what can never be resolved, and many half-dead wretches staggered out on sultry roads as long as they could stand, and others, weeping, stretched out on the ground, died in convulsions as their rolling eyes gazed upwards over the overhanging clouds. Under the sad stars they breathed out their souls. And oh, the deep despair that seized on me, the sovereign of that wretched people. I was tortured with a passionate desire to die the same death, and I hated life. No matter where my shrinking eyes were turned, I saw a multitude of gruesome forms in ghastly attitudes bestrew the ground, scattered as rotten apples they have dropped from moving branches, or as acorns thick and round with gnarled oak. Lift up your eyes, behold that holy temple unto Jove long dedicated. What availed the prayers of frightened multitudes, or incense burned on those devoted altars? In the midst of his most fervent supplications, the husband, as he pled for his dear wife, or the fond father for his stricken son, would suddenly, before a word prevailed, die, clutching at the altar of his gods, while holding in his stiffened hand a spray of frankincense, still waiting for the fire. How often sacrificial bulls have been brought to those temples, and while white-robed priest was pouring offered wine between their horns, have fallen without waiting for the stroke. While I prepared a sacrifice to Jove for my behalf, my country and 3 sons, the victim, ever moaning dismal sounds before a blow was struck, fell suddenly beside the altar, and his scanty blood ran thinly from his knives that slaughtered him. His entrails, wanting all the marks of truth, were so diseased, the warnings of the gods could not be read. The baneful malady had penetrated to the heart of life, and I have seen the carcasses of men lie rotting at the sacred temple gates, or by the very altars where they fell, making death odious to the living gods. And after I have seen some desperate man end life by his own halter, and so cheat by voluntary death his fear of death, in mad haste to outrun approaching fate, the bodies of the dead indecently were cast forth, lacking sacred funeral rites as hitherto the custom. All the gates were crowded with processions of the dead. Unburied they might lie upon the ground, or else, deserted, on their lofty pyres with no one to lament their dismal end, dissolve in their dishonored ashes. All restraint forgotten, a mad rabble fought and took possession of the burning pyres, and even the dead were ravished by their rest. And who should mourn them, wanting all the souls of sons and husbands, and of old and young must wander unlamented, and the land sufficed not for the crowded sepulchres, and the dense forest was denuded of all trees. Heartbroken at the sight of this great woe, I wailed, "O Jupiter, if truth were told of your sweet comfort in Aegena's arms, if you were not ashamed of me, your son, restore my people or entomb my corpse, that I may suffer as the ones I love." Great lightning flashed around me, and the sound of thunder proved that my complaint was heard. Accepting it, I cried, "Let these, great Jove, the happy signs of your ascent, be shown good omens given as a sacred pledge." Nearby, a sacred oak tree, grown from seed brought hither from Dodona, spread abroad its branches thinly covered with green leaves, and creeping as an army on the tree we saw a trail of ants that carried grain half hidden in the deep and wrinkled bark. And while I wondered at the endless line, I thought, "Good Father, give me citizens of equal number for my empty walls." Soon as I said those words, though not a wind was moving nor a breeze, the lofty tree began to tremble, and I heard the sound of motion in its branches. Wonder not that sudden fear possessed me, and my hair began to rise, and I could hardly stand, for so my weak knees tottered. As I made obeisance to the soil and sacred tree, perhaps I cherished in my heart a thought that, not acknowledged, cheered me with some hope. At night I lay exhausted by such thoughts, a deep sleep seized my body, but the tree seemed always present, to my gaze distinct with all its branches. I could even see the birds among its leaves, and from its boughs that trembled in the still air, moving ants were scattered to the ground in troops below, and ever as they touched the soil they grew larger and larger. As they raised themselves they stood with upright bodies, and put off their lean shapes, and absorbed their many feet, and even as their dark brown color changed, their rounded forms took on a human shape. When my strange dream departed, I awoke, the vision vanished. I complained to heaven against the idle comfort of such dreams, but as I voiced my own lament, I heard a mighty murmur echoing through the halls of my deserted palace, and a multitude of voices in confusion, where the sound of scarce an echo had disturbed the still deserted chambers for so many days. All this I thought the fancy of my dream, until my brave son Telamon in haste threw open the closed doorway as he called, "Come quickly, father, and behold a sight beyond the utmost of your fondest dreams." I did go out, and there I saw such men, each in his turn, as I had seen transformed in that weird vision of the moving ants. They all advanced and hailed me as their king. So soon as I had offered vows to Jove, I subdivided the deserted farms and dwellings in the cities to these men miraculously raised, which now are called my myrmidons, the living evidence of my strange vision. You have seen these men, and since that day their name has been declared, decisive evidence that they have retained the well-known customs of the days before their transformation. Patiently they toil, they store the profits of their labor, which they guard with valiant skill. They'll follow you to any war, well matched in years and courage, and I do promise when this east wind turns, this wind that favored you and brought you here, and when a south wind favors our design, then my brave myrmidons will go with you. This narrative and many other tales had occupied the day. As twilight fell, festivities were blended in the night in turn afforded sweet repose. Soon as the golden sun had shone its light, the east wind blowing still, the ships were stayed from sailing home. The sons of Pallas came to Cephalus, who was the elder called, and Cephalus, together with the sons of Pallas, went to see the king. Deep sleep still held the king, and Phocus was the son of Aeacus, received them at the gate, instead of Telamon and Peleus, who were marshalling the men for war. Into the inner court and beautiful apartments Phocus conducted the Athenians, and they sat down together. Phocus then observed that Cephalus held in his hand a curious javelin with golden head and shaft of some rare wood. And as they talked, he said, "It is my pleasure to explore the forest in the chase of startled game, and so I've learned the nature of rare woods, but never have I seen the match of this from which was fashioned this good javelin. It lacks the yellow tint of forest ash, it is not knotted like all corner wood. Although I cannot name the kind of wood, my eyes have never seen a javelin shaft so beautiful as this." To him replied a friend of Cephalus, "But you will find its beauty is not equal to its worth, for whatsoever it is aimed at, its flight is always certain to the mark, nor is it subject to the shift of chance, and after it is struck, although no hand may cast it back, it certainly returns, blood-stained, with every victim." Then indeed was Phocus anxious to be told whence came and who had given such a precious gift. And Cephalus appeared to tell him all, but craftily was silent on one strange condition of the fatal gift. As he recalled the mournful fate of his dear wife, his eyes filled up with tears. "Ah, pity me," he said. "If fate should grant me many years, I must weep every time that I regard this weapon, which has been my cause of tears, the unforgiven death of my dear wife. Ah, would that I have never handled it! My sweet wife Procris, if you could compare her beauty with her sister's, or Aethea's, ravished by the blustering Boreas, you would declare my wife more beautiful. 'Tis she her sire Erechtheus joined to me, 'tis she the god Love also joined to me. They called me happy, and in truth I was, and all pronounced us so until the gods decreed it otherwise. 2 joyful months of our united love were almost past, when, as the grey light of the dawn dispelled, upon the summit of Hymettus, green Aurora, glorious in her golden robes, observed me busy with encircling nets, trapping the antlered deer. Against my will, incited by desire, she carried me away with her. Oh, let me not increase her anger, for I tell you what is true. I found no comfort in her lovely face, and though she is very queen of light, and reigns upon the edge of shadowy space where she is nourished on rich nectar wine, adding delight to beauty, I could give no heed to her entreaties, for the thought of my beloved Procris intervened, and only her sweet name was on my lips. I told Aurora of our wedding joys, and all refreshing joys of love, and my first union of my couch deserted now. Enraged against me then, the goddess said, "Keep to your Procris, I but trouble you, ungrateful clown. But if you can be warned, you will no longer wish for her." And so, in anger, she returned me to my wife. Alas, I retraced the weary way, long brooding over all Aurora said. Suspicion made me doubtful of my wife, so faithful and so fair, but many things reminding me of steadfast virtue. I suppressed all doubts, until the dreadful thought of my long absence filled my jealous mind, from which I argued to the criminal advances of Aurora, for if she, so lovely in appearance, did conceal such passion in the garb of innocence until the moment of temptation, how could I be certain of the purity of even the strongest when the best are frail? So brooding, every effort I devised to cause my own undoing. By the means of bribing presents, favored by disguise, I sought to win her guarded chastity. Aurora had disguised me, and her guile determined me to work in subtle snares. Unknown to all my friends, I paced the streets of sacred Athens till I reached my home. I hoped to search out evidence of guilt, but everything seemed waiting my return, and all the household breathed an air of grief. With difficulty, I, disguised, obtained an entrance to her presence by the use of artifices many, and when I there saw her, silent in her grief, amazed, my heart no longer prompted me to test such constant love. An infinite desire took hold upon me. I could scarce restrain an impulse to caress and kiss her. Pale with grief that I was gone, her lovely face in sorrow was more beautiful. The world has not another so divinely fair. Ah, Phocas, it is wonderful to think of beauty so surpassing fair, it seems more lovable in sorrow. Why relate to you how often she repulsed my feigned attempts upon her virtue? To each plea she said, I serve one man, no matter where he may be, I will keep my love for one. Who but a man insane with jealousy would doubt the virtue of a loving wife, when tempted by the most insidious wiles, whose hallowed honor was her husband's love? But I, not satisfied with proof complete, would not abandon my depraved desire to poison the pure fountain I should guard. Increased my temptations. I caused her to hesitate and covet a rich gift. Then, angered at my own success, I said, discarding all disguise, Behold the man whose lavish promise you have established proof, the witness of your shameful treachery, your absent husband has returned to this. Unable to endure a ruined home where desecration held her sin to view, despairing and in silent shame, she fled. And I, the author of that wickedness, ran after. But enraged at my deceit and hating all mankind, she wandered far in wildest mountains, hunting the wild game. I grieved at her desertion, and the fires of my neglected love consumed my health. With greater violence my love increased, until, unable to endure such pain, I begged forgiveness and acknowledged fault, nor hesitated to declare that I might yield, the same way tempted if such great gifts had been offered to me. When I had made abject confession and she had avenged her outraged feelings, she came back to me, and we spent golden years in harmony. She gave to me the hound she fondly loved, the very one Diana gave to her when lovingly the goddess had declared, This hound, above all others, shall excel in speed. Nor was that gift the only one was given by kind Diana when my wife was hers. As you may guess, this javelin I hold forth, no other but a goddess could bestow. Would you be told the story of both gifts, attend my words, and you shall be amazed, for never such another sad event has added sorrow to the grieving world. After the son of Laius, Oedipus, had solved the riddle of the monster Sphinx, so often baffling to the wits of men, and after she had fallen from her hill, mangled, forgetful of her riddling craft, not unrevenged, the mighty Themis brooked her loss. Without delay that goddess raised another savage beast to ravage Thebes, by which the farmers' cattle were devoured, the land was ruined, and its people slain. Then all the valiant young men of the realm, with whom I also went, enclosed the field, where lurked the monster, in a mesh of many tangled nets, but not a strand could stay its onrush, and it leaped over the crest of every barrier where the toils were set. Already they had urged their eager dogs, which swiftly as a bird it left behind, eluding all the hunters it fled. At last all begged me to let slip the leash of straining Tempest, such I called the hound, my wife's dear present. As he tugged and pulled upon the tightened cords, I let them slip. No sooner done than he was lost to sight, although wherever struck his rapid feet the hot dust whirled. Not swifter flies the spear, nor whizzing bullet from the twisted sling, nor feathered arrow from the twanging bow. A high hill jutted from a rolling plain, on which I mounted to enjoy the sight of that unequalled chase. One moment caught, the next as surely free, the wild beast seemed now here, now there, elusive in its flight, swiftly sped onward, or with sudden turn doubled in circles to deceive or gain, with equal speed pursuing at each turn. The rapid hound could neither gain nor lose. Now springing forward and now doubling back, his great speed foiled. He snapped at empty air. I then turned to my javelin's aid, and while I poised it in my right hand, turned away. My gaze a moment as I sought to twine my practiced fingers in the guiding throngs, but when again I lifted up my eyes to cast the javelin where the monster sped, I saw two marble statues standing there, transformed upon the plain. One statue seemed to strain in attitude of rapid flight. The other, with wide open jaws, was changed, just in the act of barking and pursuit. Surely some god, if any god controls, decreed both equal. Neither could succeed. Now after these miraculous events, it seemed he wished to stop, but Phocus said, "What charge have you against the javelin?" And Cephalus rejoined, "I must relate my sorrows last, for I would tell you first of the story of my joys. 'Tis sweet to think upon the gliding tide of those few years of married life, when my dear wife and I were happy in our love and confidence. No woman could allure me then from her, and even Venus could not tempt my love. All my great passion for my dearest wife was equalled by the passion she returned. As early as the sun, when golden rays first glittered on the mountains, I would rise in youthful ardor to explore the fields in search of game. With no companions, hounds, nor steeds, nor nets, this javelin was alone my safety and companion in sport. And often when my right hand felt its weight, awearied of the slaughter it had caused, I would come back to rest in the cool shade and breezes from cool vales. The breeze I wooed, blowing so gently on me in the heat, the breeze I waited for, she was my rest from labor. I remember, "Ora, come," I used to say, "come soothe me, come into my breast, most welcome one, and yes, indeed, you do relieve that heat from which I burn." And as I felt the sweet breeze of the morn, as if in answer to my song, my fate impelled me further to declare my joy in song. "You are my comfort, you are my delight. Refresh me, cherish me, breathe on my face. I love you, child of lonely haunts and trees." Such words I once was singing, not aware of someone spying on me from the trees, who thought I sang to some beloved nymph or goddess by the name of Ora, so I always called the breeze. Unhappy man, the meddling telltale went to Procris with a story of supposed unfaithfulness, and slyly told in whispers all he heard. True love is credulous, and as I heard the story, Procris in swoon fell down. When she awakened from her bitter swoon, she ceased not wailing her unhappy fate, and wretched moaned for an imagined woe. So she lamented what was never done. Her woe incited by a whispered tale, she feared the fiction of a harmless name. But hope returning soothed her wretched state, and now, no longer willing to believe such wrong unless her own eyes saw it, she refused to think her husband sinned. When dawn had banished night, and I, rejoicing, ranged the breathing woods, victorious in the hunt, paused, and said, "Come, Ora, lovely breeze, relieve my panting breast." It seemed I heard the smothered moans of sorrow as I spoke, but not conceiving harm, I said again, "Come here, oh my delight!" And as those words fell from my lips, I thought I heard a soft sound in the thicket of moving leaves, and thinking surely 'twas a hidden beast, I threw this winged javelin at the spot. It was my own wife, Procris, and the shaft was buried in her breast. "Ah, wretched me," she cried, and when I heard her well-known voice, distracted, I ran towards her, only to find her bathed in blood, and dying from the wound of that same javelin she had given to me. And in her agony she drew it forth, ah me, alas, from her dear tender side. I lifted her limp body to my own in these blood-guilty arms, and wrapped the wound with fragments of my tunic that I tore in haste to staunch her blood. And all the while I moaned, "Oh, do not forsake me, slain by my accursed hands." Weak with the loss of blood and dying, she compelled herself to utter these few words. "It is my death, but let my eyes not close upon this life before I plead with you, by the dearest ties of sacred marriage, by your God and mine, and if my love for you can move your heart, and even by the cause of my sad death, my love for you increasing as I die, put away that Ora you have called, that she may never separate your soul, your love from me." So by those dying words I knew that she had heard me call the name of Ora when I wished the cooling breeze, and thought I called a goddess, cause of all her jealous sorrow and my bitter woe. Alas, too late, I told her the sad truth, but she was sinking, and her little strength swiftly was ebbing with her flowing blood. As long as life remained, her loving gaze was fixed on mine, and her unhappy life at last was breathed out on my grieving face. It seemed to me a look of sweet content was in her face, as if she feared not death. In tears he folds these things, and as they wept came the aged monarch, Aeacus, and with the monarch his 2 valiant sons and troops, new levied, trained to glorious arms. Oh, nerds. That was a long one. It was wordy. Phew. My throat hurts. But hey, it's Medea, so who are we to complain? I mean, fine, there's some Theseus in there too, but what can you do? There's some interesting other bits and pieces in there, like the story of Cephalus, which I'm pretty sure I've told before. It's sad, but also he's an ass, Sometimes it all blurs together. And the Myrmidons, those little ants, those are just so fun. I love these readings, because for all it's fun and fascinating to retell the stories in my own way, it's really something else to entirely hear the source itself, particularly when it comes to Ovid, because it's great. So it's really just extra fun for me when I get to toss these episodes in now and again. Ovid's worth it. Let's Talk About Myths Baby is written and produced by me, Liv Albert. Michaela Smith is the Hermes to my Olympians. She handles everything. She's the best. Stephanie Foley is also the best. She works to transcribe the podcast for YouTube captions and accessibility. The podcast is hosted and monetized by iHeartMedia. And that stuff about Patreon. My throat is done. Thank you all. You are the best. I am Liv, and I really do love this Roman guy. Just this one, Ovid. He was chill.